Good evening, Mr. Clerk. If we could now call the zoning subcommittee meeting to order, advertised for 5 o'clock on Tuesday, regarding the ordinance amendments to Chapter 90, various vehicle-related sections, specifically, and I think only for the paragraph 4, I believe, for the amendments. And Mr. Clerk, if you could call the roll.
Councilor Broderick.
Here.
Councilor Elliott.
Here.
Councilor Martin.
Here.
Councilor Murphy.
Here.
4 present.
All right, thank you. And present is DPD Director Adam Bakey, Councilor Dakota, City Solicitor, Councilor Rita Mercier, Mayor Milanazzo, I think Councilor Caulfield. So pretty much everybody. We've got members of the Planning Board, Jerry Frechette, Richard Lockhart, Tom Linehan, Assistant to the Manager, Henry Marchand, and does that cover pretty much all of City Hall? And thank you all for coming, and as we have members from the Pawtuckaville Citizens Council that I think are going to speak in a few minutes. We're here because there was some recommendations from the Planning Board, and some concerns / recommendations relative to changing the zoning for drive-throughs in basically neighborhood business districts. So if I could, at this point, if no one has any comments, turn it over to Mr. Bakey, and if you could explain to us what was done, what the concerns were, and then what, my understanding is there's a recommendation as to what we can make for changes to make this better. If you could do that for us, thank you.
Sure. Good evening, Councilor, and all assembled. It's my understanding that one piece of this zoning amendment that's proposed, and I believe will be at public hearing before the council next Tuesday, has created some discussion in the community. It deals with a proposal to change the way we regulate drive-through businesses in our table of uses in the zoning code. And there's 2 pieces to it. One proposes to separate the way we regulate drive-throughs from one catch-all use category that covers all types of drive-throughs into 2 separate categories. One that deals with what are generally accepted to be the less onerous of drive-throughs in terms of their impacts, those that serve banks, pharmacies, and other financial institutions, and then separate those from all other drive-throughs, which would include those that serve fast food restaurants, coffee shops, and the like. The latter category are ones that typically have longer queues and can have longer wait times and idling times and so forth, that can create some of the impacts that people perceive to be problematic with drive-throughs. This amendment is proposed because a project has been proposed on a piece of property in one of the neighborhood business districts serving the Centerville neighborhood, which is a project that the neighborhood association there has embraced and seems very supportive of, but could not proceed without this zoning amendment. And the zoning amendment also would allow similar types of projects to occur in similar locations where it might also be recognized as a positive. We have heard, however, from some other neighborhood representatives of other neighborhood groups that they do not necessarily view the proposed change as a positive. So what we are suggesting might be a solution to that is to proceed with the proportion of this amendment that separates the drive-through use into 2 separate categories. But instead of allowing this particular use by a special permit, or the less onerous drive-through use by special permit in the neighborhood business district zone, we would instead leave that zone unchanged, where all drive-throughs would be prohibited, and make a change to the traditional mixed-use zoning district, which presently allows all drive-throughs by special permit, to allow only the less onerous bank, pharmacy, and financial institution drive-throughs. And that would still be by special permit. And it would then prohibit the other types of drive-throughs in the traditional mixed-use district. That would allow the proponent of this particular project, and presumably with the support of the neighborhood association, to subsequently submit a rezoning petition for their property to take it from the present neighborhood business designation into the traditional mixed-use designation. That would be a separate amendment, advertised separately and heard by the council and the planning board separately at some future date. If the council proceeded with this change, it would allow the neighborhood to support that. In the past, the neighborhood has opposed a similar type of rezoning of that particular parcel out of the fear that allowing on a sort of under the current use category where you would grant a special permit for drive-throughs, you might allow the one that the neighborhood recognizes as not terribly onerous and beneficial, and at the same time you would allow ones for other types of businesses that they would feel are onerous and are not beneficial to the neighborhood, and they're not interested in supporting that. But if we make this distinction between the two types, they would then be interested in supporting it. And we believe that would create a positive outcome for that project as well as that neighborhood without creating any of the concerns that were raised by the residents of the other neighborhoods with the original proposal. If that's something that the council, if the substitution is something that the council wishes to be able to consider when this is brought before you at public hearing next Tuesday, we certainly can work closely with the law department to prepare the necessary ordinance substitution if you want to consider that for that meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Backey. Just a quick question, maybe to the solicitor. Is this something that we can substitute in with the advertising, and this is going to have to be renoticed, and does it have to go back to the planning board? Is it a significant change or whatever the standard is?
This aspect would not. The other potential change with respect to actually extending out a zoning district into another district, that unfortunately would be substantive enough that would require re-advertising.
You're talking about the change for the proposed development, correct?
Right.
But for our purposes,
for
the zoning
purposes,
amendment, we can
right.
go forward, provided that everybody thinks it's the best result, or it's acceptable?
Right, it's actually more restrictive, and therefore,
Okay.
it should be all right.
All right. At this point, I know some folks had come down and wanted to speak. I don't know if people have questions, want to ask any questions. I mean, I think this, hopefully we have Mr. Hamblett?
Hi, John Hamblett, 495 Varnum Avenue, with the Pawtucketville Citizens Council. First of all, thanks to Adam and his team. I think it's I think it's creative, and I think it's a smart solution. The proposed changes, as Adam has verbally outlined, supports our concerns. Drive-throughs continue to be prohibited in the neighborhood business districts, which was our primary concern in Pawtucketville. Centerville can still go ahead with its commercial opportunities, and as long as the absolutely no drive-throughs stays the same, not permitted in a neighborhood district, I think we'd support this fully. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody from the planning board? I know you gentlemen came down. Appreciate you coming out in a rainy evening.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Jerry Frechette from the Planning Board. I think this is a good solution. I think this is a good example of how we, Planning Board, took a look at the proposed ordinance change and addressed at our public hearing some of the concerns that the neighborhood had. And I think this was a viable solution because we had two things going on here. We had a particular project that we were trying to find a way to develop the site, and also we were trying to deal with unintended consequences as it affected the city as a whole and other neighborhood business districts. And I think this is a good example of, it may have taken a little bit more time, but a good example how we put it through the public hearing process, sent it back to the city council, and good example of being responsive to the concerns of the planning board as well as the residents across the city. So again, I think this is what we were looking for some sort of guidance from the city council as well to address our concerns. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Linehan?
Thank you. Tom Linehan from the Planning Board. When we had the discussion at the Planning Board meeting, one of the concerns was the mixed-use zone, to have it be allowed in the mixed-use zone. So some of the discussion we had was, instead of having it come in and just be allowed as a site plan review, the discussion came out is maybe we could make it a little more scrutinized, and if the council is willing to put it under a special permit. And therefore, if we had the special permit, it would require 4 out of our 5 votes if the scrutiny would be a lot more critical to get past our board, so therefore it'd be difficult for a project to come forward, a project that we didn't see coming down the road, but it didn't totally eliminate it. Our discussion came out with how we're not trying to look at one particular site and change the zoning for the whole city. So how could we benefit the whole city in this matter? And maybe there would be construction and sites that would come down the road that if we totally eliminate it, would have no control in allowing that site to be built if everybody was in favor of it. So we thought to scrutinize it more, maybe the option would be to do a special permit. Therefore, the matter would have to come before us, get the 4/5 vote on the special permit, then it would have to still go before the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit as well. On the special permit authority, we do have a lot of special permit authority, except for one matter that now the council has, and that came up as well. I think I brought that up, which was how the council adopted that they now have special permit authority over for planned development use in the neighborhood, which I think came up when we had that project on Westview Road. So therefore, the planning board had no problem with either that special permit being adopted by the council or by the planning board, but it was just another way to look at a development that may have a proposal that people on board with for, and maybe just, and not totally eliminated as it came before us to begin with. So that was a discussion we had with plenty of members. I did have the opportunity to speak with Adam today. I feel that his proposal is a good proposal. So we were just saying that we thought more dialogue from the neighborhood, because on our matter, we didn't have as much input from the neighborhood. Of course, we know there's 2 neighborhoods here, and our goal is to try to satisfy all the neighborhoods best we can before any public hearing, as I know most of the council wants to do the exact same thing. So we were trying to look at how can we scrutinize it, but still allow a project that came in that everybody felt, the majority, 4/5, more than the majority obviously, could pass a project that we thought would have to go before 2 boards, whether it be our board as well as the council or the Zoning Board of Appeals. So we just thought maybe have that thrown out there for the council to consider when they made their ultimate decision. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate all the review and the help on this. Councilor Caulfield.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you and your committee for convening this meeting. And what was before us a week ago, and I'm happy to hear that there's a compromise. My understanding is whenever there was a zoning change, the council always voted on the merits of that zoning change. And Adam, what was the format before the compromise? It was going to be blanket zoning? In other words, it was drive-throughs throughout the city and so forth? It was just going to come under this one ordinance? Explain that, please.
Well, the original proposal, which is technically still what is before the council, would separate drive-throughs, which presently in the zoning code, all drive-throughs are treated the same manner with respect to it being a use, into 2 different categories that identified drive-throughs that are viewed as more onerous on their surrounding properties and in terms of their traffic impacts and so forth, from those that are viewed as less onerous. And then in each case, it goes through the city and identifies which parts of the city they are prohibited and which parts of the city they are allowed by special permit. And that's the case today, that there are parts of the city where they're prohibited and parts where they're allowed by special permit. And the substantive change with the proposal in terms of where they would be allowed is that the less onerous ones would be allowed with a special permit in the neighborhood business district. The substitute proposal here would, instead of allowing that, would further restrict the more onerous drive-throughs in the traditional mixed-use district.
And the old process, what was the old process? Didn't it come before the council for every zoning change and the merits of that zoning change?
Well, like this one, like any zoning change, does not take effect until the council has held a public hearing and voted on it.
Oh, I know that, but I mean...
They do come before the council.
Under the old format, we're going from the old format to something that's different. Why are we changing?
I guess I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, I mean, everything was going fine the way it was, and I just want to know, why is this amendment to the ordinance coming forward?
The amendment was brought forward as a result of the interests of both a property owner and one of our neighborhood organizations jointly in seeing a particular site developed in a manner that would have required some change to our zoning to allow it to happen. And either of the two proposals, the one that is officially before you, as well as the substitution that has been discussed this evening, would meet that objective.
And that's the property in Centerville.
It is a property in Centerville, yes.
And under the old format, we would take that up individually and vote on the merits of that issue.
I guess prior to any zoning change,
See, what I'm concerned about is what happens in Centerville, and that one particular issue shouldn't interfere with people on Chester Street, Westford Street, Mammoth Road. That's where I'm coming from. But I'm happy to hear a compromise, and I want to congratulate and thank the Pawtuckaville Neighborhood Council for coming forward and speaking their mind, and this is democracy truly in action. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Council Martin.
Thank you. In part to, I guess, respond to Councilor Caulfield's question, it's often the case that the council gets petitions or requests to rezone the zoning district for an individual parcel of land, to change the district, right, to extend a different district into encompass this parcel of land, which is a zoning map amendment specific to that site. And that those are zoning amendments that go to the planning board, come back to the council after all the deliberative process. There are other amendments, I think, including these, that are zoning amendments that address the uses in all districts across the city, not map amendments, but actual amendments to the code, which by definition affect every zoning district in the city that's zoned that way. So, you know, whether this particular change had, you know, was designed to benefit one parcel or the other, wasn't a rezoning of this site. But apparently now it's going to be a rezoning of this site in Centerville down the line. And so I think it's, you know, it's perfectly proper for the planning board and the planning department to propose things from time to time that affect all the zoning districts in the city. I think when we did the rezoning a few years ago, I think the city's vastly improved for that rezoning, but we understood at the time that in a city this size, this diverse, that we weren't going to get it right, completely right all at once, and that there would be need for periodic change. And we have that in this proposal. You know, there are a dozen or so proposals that came up, and one in particular generated some controversy. So I think this is the way the process is supposed to work. I think DPD's done a very good job addressing the concerns of the different neighborhoods involved. So I too am pleased. I want to thank the people that came here to express their views last week and this week, and I'm sure we'll have some people here next week as well. But it's the process we have, and I think it's working pretty much as we intended it would work. So I appreciate the efforts of all the parties.
Thank you. Councilor.
Yeah, I want to agree with Councilor Martin. I do think it's a practical approach, especially during this economy, to do what we can to establish or have more businesses locate in the city and expand that tax base, and at the same time still afford neighborhoods and people that live in those neighborhoods, and to let them know that they can rest assured that there are still protections in place. But I think it's important that as we continue to look at the zoning code and make changes and amendments, that we're not going backwards. We're not going to, because I think we went through a very good process, and it was a long process, and I think we have a very good zoning code in place, a good map in place, and something like this, you have to make some arrangements. Otherwise, that piece of property in particular is going to sit there. It's going to be idle. It's not on the tax rolls, and you know, it's a viable piece of commercial property. So I know I can't take a position, but I think it's a move in the right direction. And, you know, the neighborhood organizations, again, they bring the issues forward, sit down with you, Mr. Bakey, and come up with a very reasonable approach that it's a win-win again. So really a job well done to the planning board and the neighborhood organization and city staff.
Thank you. With, I think, no further discussion, I want to thank Mr. Bakey and his department, the neighborhood group that originally brought this to the attention of the planning board, which then brought it to our attention and the administration's attention. So this is how the process should work, does work. I know that Councilor Dakota had an excellent motion last week. It's going to the neighborhood subcommittee to let people know and come up with maybe a more public plan of how we're going to bring these forward, how these will be noticed going forward. It'll be this process, which I think we see works. I think this is a win-win. We're getting some things done. We're going to be able to accommodate growth, but at the same time be more restrictive, which I think is exactly what we need to do, and we can be a little bit more selective. And I think that what we had was an ordinance change that would change the zoning map, Council, and that now what we're doing is we're going to change it so that it doesn't change it everywhere, but it can be more restrictive and be changed for the parcel that's in question, and hopefully we can see some development there on a parcel that's been vacant for a number of years. So it can be a win-win. Thank you, everybody, for coming out in this difficult weather. And without any, I guess, maybe, Madam Solicitor, at this point, is a public hearing next week, a motion to just recess or take under advisement would be appropriate? We can't take a vote to make a recommendation, correct? So moved. Councilor Elliott, second. Councilor Martin. All those in favor? Chair votes yes. Thank you very much.